Hi there, my name is Jess Romeo, and I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner, social worker, practice owner, and trans guy. And in my private practice, I use PracticeQ as my electronic health record. So, since PracticeQ recently changed how it is mapping gender and sex to be more trans-inclusive, I want to show you how to make your IntakeQ EHR a trans-inclusive EHR, and how to navigate this change while still offering patients the ability to self-identify in ways that are affirming to them. So in this video, we'll go over the basics of trans-inclusivity in patient demographic options. We'll talk about how to make sure that data fields populate to the places they need to, and I'll talk through some of the benefits and disadvantages of their recent change and tell you how my trans-affirming practice plans to navigate it. So let's get into it. So here we are in the IntakeQ patient face sheet. I created a test patient just for this purpose. So this should look familiar to you if you use this EHR. There may be a few fields that you don't recognize in the face sheet because they were custom fields we created for our practice. So just so you're aware, my private practice specializes in working with trans and gender diverse folks. So if not the majority, certainly the plurality of the patients at this practice identify as a gender that's different from the sex they were assigned at birth. So we needed robust solutions to be able to capture that data in affirming ways and make sure there were no administrative issues in people getting their super bills or getting their medications when the name that they go by and the name that is on insurance may differ, or when the gender they identify with but the sex listed with insurance may differ as well. So first, let's talk about the change made by IntakeQ to turn this field into this field. So previously, there was just a field called gender here. Sex was a field that didn't exist, and that data field populated into the e-prescribing portal, and it matched people's insurance records. And that was important because if those fields don't match, people could have delays in getting their prescriptions or have coverage denied if their gender is listed as something different. Now, I'm an out-of-network practice, but insurance is still relevant because we do send patients super bills to submit reimbursement. This field I could not change the name of, so until this change, we had been using the gender field to mean what is the sex that is listed with your insurance. And that's how we asked the question in the initial intake form. So I'll show you that now, how a question on a form can map to a field within the client's face sheet. So this is from our view, the initial intake form that we send to all patients, and I'll just run you through exactly the language that we use. So first of all, one important thing to do when forms are not necessarily affirming, or you're asking people to report information that could cause some gender dysphoria, you want to sort of name that from the beginning. This is how we do so. So we ask, please enter your information. Please note that we honor your gender identity and chosen name. However, if there's another sex/gender or name listed on insurance or other documents, we'll also need that information to keep you from experiencing coverage or other administrative delays. If you're trans or intersex and have questions about sex designations and insurance coverage, please let us know. So people have this information right from the beginning of working with us. This is the new patient health history form that everyone fills out before their initial assessment appointment with us. So right off the bat, we're saying, we get it, we honor your identity, and there are some administrative realities here, so we don't want to keep you from getting care, getting your medications. But feel free to ask us any questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. So this is a test patient. I had already entered this information. We have a field called name on insurance, aka quote-unquote legal name, and I won't get into too many details on this, but basically, legal name isn't really a thing. It is, and it isn't. One of the aspects of being trans-affirming is understanding the granularity and differences between the concept of a legal name and the concept of a name that is on insurance. If you're a healthcare provider and you need to send claims or you need to send medications, you need the name on insurance. So that is what we've called the field. But just since trans folks are used to being asked, what's your legal name? We did put AKA legal name so people know exactly what this refers to. And it also allows people who are cisgender the opportunity to say, my name on insurance is, let's say, Angelica, but I go by Angie. So it offers people the ability to put a nickname here, which is what they go by. We also have people indicate if there are places where they don't want us to use their name, so that's important for their confidentiality. And then We have gender how you identify, and this is something that we're going to have to change now that IntakeQ has changed things. So we'll get into that. Pronouns, we'll keep that. And I say pronouns / how you'd like to be addressed because some people don't use pronouns and prefer to just use their name. So we kept that open. And this is the question on our intake form that we have populate what had been the gender field in PracticeQ, which will now be the sex field. So the question we ask is, for insurance purposes, please select the sex category we should use when submitting claims to your insurance company. And we just have female or male. They also have an intersex option. I personally haven't seen people who have intersex variations or intersex traits have intersex listed as an official sex with their insurance company. I'm sure that that exists, but folks with intersex traits are often still assigned male or female at birth. So this is just to know that even if you don't have any patients listing intersex as a sex category that goes to their insurance, doesn't mean you don't have patients with intersex traits. Just an important note there. And then let's see, I think that's it with regard to gender in the initial form. So I'll show you the patient view of the form real quick, just so you can see what it looks like from their perspective. So if you're a patient, this is what it would look like. Put your name, and then gender is currently a text box. That is going to have to change to a drop down. And this is the question that ended up in a data field in our EHR called a patient affirmed gender. Now that's just going to be called gender, which I think is great. I think that is a very positive change from IntakeQ. But previously it was a text box which allowed for a lot more creativity, and some of the genders that my patients have identified on here, I will be sad to lose. I think my favorite text entry for gender was error 404, gender not found. It's pretty great. I'll be sad to miss that. So that's just for you to see what this looks like from a patient's perspective. But then back in our view, let's look at the back end of the form and how we've mapped everything together. So gender, currently a text box, and it maps to a field called patient affirmed gender. That will have to change, and I want to make sure that I'm not able to map it to the new field gender. It looks like I can't, but let's watch what happens if I change it to a drop down. I think I should be able to map this to gender now. Yes, I can. So that confirms to me, I'm really doing this in real time. This confirms to me that the new field of gender in IntakeQ cannot be entered as a text box. It must be entered as a dropdown, which means patients don't have ultimate freedom to self-identify the way they want to. I'm never going to see an entry again that says error 404, gender not found, unless I type it in as a dropdown option myself, which, as tempting as that is, I'm not going to do. So we will need to go in and change that, but we'll need to enter options per line. So let's go ahead and enter in as comprehensive a list of options as we can while not being overwhelming. And that's just my personal preference. I think it would be really reasonable to have tons of options here. I'm going to keep it a little bit more streamlined because I'll give people the option within the therapeutic relationship to talk a little bit more about what that means for them. Another option you could think about, especially if you do specialize with this population, is to put category options here and then still allow people the chance to do a text box. So you could do cisgender, transgender, decline to answer. You could do that. And that way you still know sort of what category patients identify with, but they can still use a text box if they want to ultimately be creative. That's one way you could go about it. I'm not going to do that because I think it's unnecessarily complicated for an intake form, but just to let you know, if you didn't want to lose the patient's ability to use a text box, that's an option you could go for. But what I'm actually going to do here is go through a variety of options. And so I've entered female, male, non-binary, trans-feminine, trans-masculine, trans-female, trans-male, because there are differences between trans-feminine masculine and trans-female and trans-male. And just thinking off the top of my head of some of the gender identities that come through my practice fairly often, I've added agender, bigender, demigender. And then I'm going to kind of, for respective people who don't fit into these boxes, what I'm not going to use is the word other. We are othered enough. I don't want another form where a gender diverse person has to identify as an other. So I'm going to say something else not listed here. Based on your personality and your practice and your voice, you could say different things. You could be a little tongue-in-cheek and say, my gender can't be contained. I don't like labels. You could say a lot of different things in this box, but I'm going to keep it pretty professional and just say something else not listed here. Now what I need to do, I'm going to just copy all of that. This is saved, and now I need to go into the custom genders area of IntakeQ and add all of these in so that they will actually map to the gender field. Since I had my EHR set up to let people self-identify, I actually haven't built out the custom genders in my profile because they didn't map to anything that I actually used. So let's go in and do that now. So to do this, what you'll want to do is navigate to the profile settings and then go to Other and add new custom gender. So I'm going to remove this, and what I'm going to do is add all of those options. They may already have non-binary here, so I'm going to see if that ends up as a duplicate, and I'll delete one of them, and then decline to say as the last option. So now I have all of these custom genders. Yes, I want that to be saved. Let's go back to our test patient. And now in our test patient, we can see that IntakeQ has made these three options for sex. And that works for our purposes because remember, this field is about sex listed with insurance. And then gender, now we have all of these lists here. So yes, that is what I suspected. IntakeQ already had female, male, and non-binary. So I'm just going to delete my non-binary option since that's already programmed into their system. But this at least gives people a nice list of options to identify with. Now I'm just going in and deleting non-binary since they've already got it, and save those settings. And that's how I'm navigating the gender change in IntakeQ. You can go in and make changes similar to this if you'd like. And if you want to see more about how to make IntakeQ affirming for patient's name, check out that video as well. Thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful.